good luck finding someone who will disagree with this line.
Allowing people to live in squalor and to be victimized on the street, that is inhumane.
Now, reports are surfacing that Portland's mayor wants to ban homeless camping downtown and move people to a large encampment elsewhere in the city. Our team asked him directly. The answer is more complicated.
The goal should be 0 unsanctioned homeless camps in the city of Portland.
And amid reports the city wants to beef up the police bureau's ranks, a sign of progress.
There's been a little more vocal support from the mayor's office, from a few on city council, and I think that's encouraging.
Plus, more drama from the Newberg School Board. This time, conservative members claim people are posting their personal information online. It's called doxxing, and in Oregon, it can get you sued. Here's the story. Good evening, good Friday evening. It's Friday, thankfully. Welcome to The Story. Fascinating show tonight, as you can tell. And we, as always, want to hear from you. So email thestory@kgw.com. And look at that. Look at that right there. We have a hashtag now. It's TheStoryKGW. And for those of you wondering, those of you who have been asking, I would actually prefer a hashtag focused on the show and on our conversation, and one that doesn't change no matter who's hosting. So we've made the pivot, hashtag TheStoryKGW, and we appreciate all of our viewers for weighing in. That being said, let's get started. Okay, let's get right to the big story, and we'll kick it off with a viewer question. It's what we do on this show. Dee emailed us and said, I am so frustrated. When are officials going to put the rights of its, meaning the city of Portland's, citizens first? Why are there not designated spaces for the homeless to camp? We moved away from our preferred lifestyle in downtown to the suburbs. So Dee, I just do want to point out everyone in Portland is a citizen regardless of where they sleep, but we hear your frustration and we appreciate you writing in. Thank you. And specific to the housing crisis, there is a headline making pretty big waves this week. It came from the Portland Mercury, and it reads, Mayor Wheeler's office considers banning homeless camping downtown. The paper reporting that nothing is official or even formally proposed, but that Wheeler's staff have been, quote, discussing a strategy to ban homeless camping from areas of downtown Portland and to move those campers into a high population outdoor camping zone. In other words, they're weighing banning camps in one part of town, at least according to these emails, while finding a plot of land elsewhere to move people to, a big one, presumably. Again, all of this is according to the Mercury, and we'll get into the logistics here in a second. But we do want to flag part of this reporting as our quote of the day. Quote, my position on villages beyond 60, hard no. No in all caps. That quote is from Housing Commissioner Dan Ryan in an email to the mayor, quoted by the Mercury. And the phrase, by the way, beyond 60, refers to city code that reportedly limits outdoor sanctioned camps to 60 residents tops, because anything bigger than that is deemed high impact. Okay, so that in mind, I'm joined by Mike Benner. And Mike, we saw you had that one-on-one conversation with the mayor yesterday. And because that article was out, you asked him about it. And it sounds like he's sort of walking that back a little bit.
That's a good way of putting it, Maggie. Mayor Ted Wheeler told me that he just does not have the support of city council to outright ban camping downtown. He just doesn't. He says after the safe rest villages are opened in the coming months, there will still be thousands of people living in unsanctioned camps throughout the city. The mayor says we need to reduce the number of those camps, especially those near schools, sensitive nature areas, homes, and businesses. Mayor Wheeler says 0 unsanctioned camps should be the goal. He's now working to identify areas that would give people experiencing homelessness access to some of those basic services like toilets, running water, laundry, and transportation.
We're looking for humane alternatives to people living in what I see as squalid conditions. The status quo is inhumane, both for people who are living on the streets, who are in many ways being victimized in their time on the streets, and it's unfair to the public at large, who also have a right to be able to access their homes and their businesses and their parks and public right-of-ways unfettered.
Interesting. And again, that full interview is up on YouTube right now, your sit down with the mayor. I'm curious, in light of the article and in light of the conversation that you had with him, what are advocates saying about this?
So I spoke with folks at Street Roots, who, Maggie, you know quite well.
Sure.
And that is the nonprofit that publishes a newspaper sold by members of the houseless community. The executive director is urging Mayor Wheeler to pump the brakes a little bit, do his due diligence. Kaya Sand says yes, there are a lot of people on the streets living in unsanctioned camps. She says it's because they did not move around during the pandemic. They stayed put and built communities. But it's not all that bad. And she points to something that happened in Old Town this past summer. Listen.
It was at dusk and a car hit a man on a motorcycle, and I happened to be walking by, and the man on the motorcycle was lying in the street bleeding out of his head, and the people piled out of those tents, and those are people fear, and they tended to this man and they got him an ambulance, and honestly they saved his life. And I just say that in response to say that there's a lot of humanity, even if it's really complicated.
Incredible story, isn't it? You may be wondering when we may start to see a reduction in the number of unsanctioned camps. I think we've still got some time. Sounds like the mayor is in the exploratory stages of this plan. He did tell me that he is willing to work with anyone on this issue.
All right. Again, very interesting conversation. A lot in those 15 minutes in that sit down with the mayor. Mike Benner, thank you. So, by the way, when we talk about what the city can and cannot do related to homeless camping, there is a key court case that dictates a lot of those boundaries. So let's dive in our segment, How Did We Get Here? The case is called Martin v. the City of Boise, as in Boise, Idaho, and it's been used to fight camping restrictions in several cities, including Salem. In 2018, the 9th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals ruled a city cannot charge someone with a crime or give them a ticket for sleeping in a public space if there are no shelter beds or there's nowhere else for that person to go. The judge deemed charging someone with a crime in that case, like when they have no other choice, a violation of the 8th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, meaning it qualifies as cruel and unusual punishment. So in cases where you hear of cities and counties weighing camping bans like this, that ruling is often what stands legally in their way. All right, let's talk about solutions now, hopefully tied to Portland's ongoing problem with gun violence. Now, Mike Benner's interview with the mayor that you just heard part of focused on that. We aired some of it last night. And the big issue they're tackling right now is trying to increase staffing in the Portland Police Bureau. The mayor says they are planning to rehire retired officers and get their new gun violence team off the ground. Take a listen.
There is no question in my mind that if we have the focused intervention team fully staffed, which I expect to have happen next month and deployed, in addition to the enhanced community safety team that I directed the chief to deploy several months ago that makes sure that we have investigative follow-up for gun violence. And if we add to that a longer-term strategy around rebuilding the Portland Police Bureau so we can get back to community policing, which is what we should be doing in the first place, as opposed to just having officers bounce from call to call to call in their cars, this will definitely have an impact on reducing gun violence.
So the mayor thinks they should be able to solve the staffing problem. He says he's confident about that. Back in August, though, we reported the Bureau was just struggling to recruit officers for the new focused intervention team, like get people who are already employed by the Bureau to join that team. It's supposed to have 12 officers and 2 sergeants, but at the time they had nowhere near that number. So this week on Straight Talk, Laurel Porter asked the lieutenant heading up that team if things have gotten better.
Officers were very hesitant, a lot of different reasons, but ultimately like lack of support for doing this work. And I think some things have changed a little bit. There's been a little more vocal support from the mayor's office, from a few on city council, and I think that's encouraging. I think it'll be important to actually get those votes to kind of refund, increase staffing, and really to have a long-term commitment from our elected leaders.
So I know some of you are probably thinking, how is the focused intervention team different from the gun violence reduction team that was disbanded? You might remember that team was accused of disproportionately targeting black people in traffic stops. And again, that was the gun violence reduction team. It was disbanded last year amid calls for police reform during the George Floyd protests. Here is why the head of the new team says things will be different this time around.
I think one of the differences is we have this community oversight group, and really everything and anything we do, we talk about with them. We meet once a week with the entire committee, and really, we're opening to listening to their input, their ideas. They're going to tell us what they like, what they don't like. And the idea is we want to build that trust with the community.
Now, the other element to all of this is freeing up officers to spend more time focusing on gun violence. And that is something that Lakiana Drury from the group Word is Bond brought up with Laurel.
I would say also fully funding the Portland street response to offload some of the Bureau's duties. They're overburdened. They're being called to do too many things. And if we can allow the Portland street response to respond to mental health calls across the city, I think that would also bring down their burden.
PSR, what he's referring to, is the group that sends a crisis counselor and a paramedic to calls involving mental health and addiction, nonviolent calls. Now, last we heard, all of the commissioners fully support adding more funding to and therefore expanding Portland Street Response, which right now just operates as a pilot in Southeast Portland. That includes the mayor, although we should note we have not seen if that's included in his fall budget yet, and that is expected to be released soon. And by the way, you can watch Laurel's entire interview with Drury and Lieutenant Dulio tonight at 7 on Straight Talk here on KGW. She also speaks with Multnomah County's Chief Deputy District Attorney Kristen Snowden, who's in charge of the unit that handles gun crimes and gun homicides. Now, police say Portland has seen more than 1,000 shootings this year, 1,026 to be exact, and it's still only October. Now, Phil sent us this email. Great question. He said, what constitutes a shooting? Is it individual shell casings? Again, we think that's really interesting because we've reported on shootings that involve dozens of bullets, like this one from last month near Northeast 95th and Prescott, where officers found more than 100 casings at the scene. So he's asking, is that one shooting that has more than 100 casings? Police told us, yes, they tally that as one shooting incident. And that's true, even if they find casings from different guns at the same scene. So when we talk about 1,000 shootings, we're talking about 1,000 individual incidents, not the number of bullets. Let's talk about Newberg now. The school board that banned Black Lives Matter and gay pride flags, deeming them political symbols. Remember, all that has sparked, national attention, and there were student protests, especially at football games and whatnot. It also drew some lawsuit threats from people angry about the ban, including from the ACLU. But brace yourself, because the tables now are turning rather quickly. Now it's the board members themselves, the ones who voted for this ban, who are doing the suing. That rhymes. Why? One word: doxxing. And for those of you not familiar with the worst parts of social media, and by the way, I envy you, that word may be foreign. Let me explain. Brian Shannon, the board member who initiated the ban on political symbols there on the left, along with 3 other conservative members of the board, Trevor DeHart, Renee Powell, and Chair David Brown, are suing 4 community members for allegedly doxing them or posting their private information online without their consent. The suit claims the defendants posted about where these school board members work, even a vineyard where board member Renee Powell's artwork was hung up. And the posts allegedly encouraged people to contact the board members' employers. And their attorney says these board members are now afraid.
This has caused a significant amount of anxiety and fear amongst the 4 members who retained me because of the social media based discussions going after them in their personal capacities. The behavior on social media was just completely outrageous. It is clear that attempts were made to get people fired from their jobs, have their art taken down, contact their employers. I mean, these are personal attacks, organized and publicly discussed on social media.
That was the lawyer there. He spoke to us late today from his car. In the lawsuit, by the way, the board members claim that they're having trouble sleeping, they're carrying personal protective equipment, and that they're afraid to go out to eat. And the suit also claims they've had, quote, economic damages, but it doesn't specify how those damages occurred or how much money that we're talking about, and their lawyer didn't want to say in that interview. So all that in mind, let's talk about doxing again. It's worth noting all the information the lawsuit claims was posted on social media was already easy to find online, and because they're elected officials, it is public record. But as the suit points out, it's not just the information that's key here. It's the fact that the plaintiffs were afraid and they suffered damages, they say. And this is going to be up to a judge and how a judge interprets a new Oregon law passed this summer that bans doxing and allows to sue if you are doxed. All up to the judge now. The law says that personal information, what qualifies under the law is a person's home address, personal email address, personal phone number or social security number, contact information for their employer, contact information for their family members, and pictures of their kids or where they went to school. Again, that's what the law considers doxing to be. It also says, among other things, the plaintiff must have been, quote, stalked, harassed, or injured by the disclosure, and that the defendant must have intended for those things to happen. And according to the law, harassment can be as simple as making someone afraid. But again, these are elected officials who are supposed to be held accountable by their constituents. And according to the lawsuit, no one on social media encouraged their followers to do anything but share their concerns with the board members' employers. Regardless, here is what their lawyer has to say.
This isn't about holding elected officials responsible for their decisions. That is, go to the ballot, vote them out, have a recall. But you're starting to attack people and their spouses and their ability to make a living, and branding people publicly as racists and saying that racists shouldn't have jobs. I mean, that is way beyond appropriate.
Now, if you've watched the show, you know this is part of ongoing coverage. We have a ton more on the Newberg situation at kgw.com. As for tonight, we have reached out to the school board members for comment. 2 of them have responded, and we're working to talk to them next week. Let us know if you have any questions for them that you want us to ask. Email thestory@kgw.com or use that hashtag, #TheStoryKGW.
Let's talk about the big fight over dams in Oregon, a battle that's been playing out in court for more than 20 years. Environmentalists say
the salmon are struggling.
But at the same time, power companies say they have
serious concerns about keeping the lights on.
We'll break it all down when the story continues.
People are already using the new hashtag. We love it. Thanks, guys. Keep sending your questions and your comments to thestory@kgw.com or use that hashtag, #TheStoryKGW, on Twitter. We are always checking your messages during the show. Okay, moving on. If you've lived in the Pacific Northwest for a while, you're probably familiar with the fight over dams on our river. And there's actually a lawsuit that's been going on for, wait for it, 2 decades over how the state protects salmon on the Columbia and Snake Rivers. But yesterday, both sides of that lawsuit agreed to actually put a pause on things while they try to work out a solution. Here's Pat Doris.
The fight over dams versus wild salmon on the Snake and Columbia Rivers has sparked controversy and arguments for decades. 20 years ago, environmentalists and others, including the state of Oregon, sued the federal government for not doing more to protect the salmon from the dams. The lawsuit is still active. Advocates like Brett Vandenheuvel from the Columbia River Keeper are still not satisfied.
The salmon are struggling. The dams on the Columbia and Snake Rivers are making the water too hot for salmon to survive. It's been a long-running problem, and we need real solutions to prevent salmon from going extinct.
On the other side, branches of the federal government charged with operating the dams, and industry associations like the Public Power Council, which represents 100 power companies across 4 states that serve as many as 6 million customers.
When we heard from the state of Oregon and other plaintiffs about what they wanted to do to change the river operations, we were flabbergasted, frankly, because it would have been such a draconian change to the operations of the river. We'd talk about serious reliability concerns, meaning serious concerns about keeping the lights on.
One of the big strategies for helping wild salmon is releasing lots of water from the dams to help flush young salmon out to sea. But that water bypasses the turbines that make electricity. It's good for the fish, not good for power. Oregon got nearly half of all its electricity from the federal dam system in 2019. This week, both sides agreed to pause that long-running lawsuit. They agreed how much water will be spilled to help salmon over just the next year, and they agreed to talk about what should happen after that. It apparently all happened at least in part because members of President Biden's cabinet are paying attention.
For the very first time, we're seeing cabinet-level officials at the federal government making commitments to restore salmon and take a hard look at breaching the Snake River dams.
Well, they didn't exactly say that. In a press release, the Secretary of Energy, Jennifer Granholm, seemed to support the dams, stating, "Hydroelectric power plays an incredible role in integrating renewable resources and providing carbon-free power." And Secretary of the Interior, Deb Haaland, seemed to support the salmon, stating, "While it is important to balance the region's economy and power generation, it's also time to improve conditions for tribes that have relied on these important species since time immemorial." But at least they know there's an issue. Also, Washington Governor Jay Inslee and Senator Patty Murray announced they're starting a 9-month study to see if there's a reasonable way to replace the benefits of those lower Snake River dams if they are torn down. In Northeast Portland, Pat Doris, KGW News.
Keep those questions and comments coming by using the hashtag #TheStoryKGW or email thestory@kgw.com. In the meantime, you might know we like to keep Portland pretty weird. Not that Portland needs our help, but how about keeping Lincoln City weird? Well, it turns out they've got a lot of spooky stuff it's perfect for Halloween. When the story continues. This next question is so depressing. I'm supposed to say, welcome back. Everybody ready for another pandemic Halloween? No, that sounds terrible. But regardless, do you have your candy? You're coming to try to make it light. Do you have your candy, your costumes, your masks, both the scary and the medical kind, which I would argue COVID is scarier, but whatever. Well, if you want to get out of Portland for the holiday, maybe head to the coast or something, we've got an idea for you. John Goodwin takes us on a tour of some of the haunted parts of Lincoln City.
So this one is Calming Draft. It's one of our super popular ones.
In Lincoln City, Halloween is in the air.
But it starts off as kind of a blue-green, and when you shake it up, it changes to this deep magenta color.
Inside the cheeky cauldron, it's all things Harry Potter.
Somebody can expect to find magic and love and acceptance and good food and amazing drinks and some fantastic potions and collectibles.
The owner goes by the name Willow Moon. She says, Harry Potter fan or not, you're welcome here.
We get a lot of muggles coming in here that know nothing about Harry Potter, and they're enjoying all of the potions and shaking things up and just seeing what we have.
The potions are collector's items. They're used as calm down jars. They offer classes for making your own, along with tarot card readings, and soon we'll have a full kitchen.
We'll also have British food, so sausage rolls, bangers and mash, just all kinds of amazing stuff, and our baked goods.
Down the street in the Taft neighborhood, you won't want to eat what's coming out of this oven at the Lincoln City Glass Center.
I mean, there are some spirits here.
Riley Hoagland is a Lincoln City Council member. He's all made up for his role as a haunted Taft tour guide.
Between an hour and a half and 2 hours of a walk, and we all have lanterns and we walk around together.
Tour tickets for this weekend and next are selling fast. The walk winds through the Glass Center's warehouse, home to some haunted tales.
This particular building has a gentleman named Gus that's part of it. He used to hold seances here back in the 40s. There's a picture in this building that's a painting that nobody knows who it is. And that before this year, we just knew him as Baby G. And the first time that we told this story, one of the employees was like, hold on, gets this painting that says, we don't know who this is and why it's here, and it moves all the time, and we only know that this is Baby G. And so we were like, what?
If that's too creepy for you, there will be several live music shows, parties, even drive-through trick-or-treating at the nearby outlets on Halloween night.
And we have a lot of unique things.
So enjoy a little history and fun in a place much more than just a beach town. In Lincoln City, John Goodwin, KGW News.
There's a haunted baby. What would you do if that baby was behind me when we came out to the shot? I was just like, that's terrifying. Okay, so yikes. Please, I want to forget that. Please keep sending your questions and your comments to thestory@kgw.com. Find us on social media. We're going to finish the story right after this. What was that? Quick reminder about our Hey Help campaign this week. It's the last day. Obviously, we're asking you to consider donating to Portland Opportunities Industrialization Center and Rosemary Anderson High School, or POIC and RAHS. They provide workforce training and career placement opportunities for communities of color, as well as violence reduction programs. So to donate, just hold your phone's camera up to this QR code or go to kgw.com/heyhelp. And by the way, this is a micro donation drive, so feel free to give any amount, no matter how small. And while you have your phone, pick it up, I should say, and follow us on Twitter at @TheStoryKGW or email thestory@kgw.com. Still freaked out by the haunted baby. Okay, so that's the end of the story here at 6. Let's bring in Laurel Porter now. Laurel, what you got on tap?
Thank you, Maggie. We're talking about a huge problem in Portland right now, car theft. The news at 6:30 starts now.
This is KGW News at 6:30.
And we begin tonight with